Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's RD2RD Live Show. I'm going to start out by saying Facebook has changed a bit about how it does live videos. So I'm going to check a few things here on Facebook just to make sure everything is going as planned. So if you're here, you're watching, feel free to comment and tell me that you're hearing me just fine. And Stacey, would you give us a little audio check here?
Hey, Megan.
Okay.
I'm here in San Francisco.
Yeah. Make sure that Stacey's audio is coming in loud and clear as well. Okay, so today we are tackling the topic of RDN resume refresh and really a little bit broader look too at the dynamics of job hunting during a pandemic. And there really isn't a playbook for job hunting during a pandemic in the modern age of, looking for jobs, that are perhaps some jobs have changed to more virtual. But what I'm really hoping Stacey's going to dive into today is some of the nuts and bolts of, resume basics, some things, what's changed, what we should be focusing on, LinkedIn, which I think you're really an expert on, to really talk to us about, some of the changes we can make on our LinkedIn profile if we're looking for a job, and the messaging. So we're going to dive into a lot of fun topics today. Before we do so, I want to give Stacey a chance to kind of tell us a little bit about her background and her career pathway as, the founder of nutritionjobs.com. Definitely has a story to tell there. So Stacey, why don't you kick us off and tell us about yourself?
Hey, Megan. Thank you so much for having me on your RD2RD Facebook Live. It's so exciting. I love watching all of them. And you and I became fancy friends a couple, I don't know, was it 2 or 3 years ago? We were side-by-side booths at the marketplace. And so we got to hear each other's pitch from like 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. the whole day, helping each other out and
throwing candy across the,
exactly. Aisle. Yeah. So it was really fun to be together then and now. So actually this year I am celebrating 20 years of having nutrition jobs, which seems it's amazing. I know that the business is probably older than some dietetic students out there. So it's evolved. It is not the same thing as when I initially started it. And I've been a dietitian for 30 years, according to the Academy. I just got an email from them like, wait, I think this was sent to the wrong person. Who are you talking to?
The years fly by, don't they?
The years fly by, yeah. So I started off in clinical dietetics. I had always had a passion for the granular tube feedings, TPN. I worked in a burn unit, in a NICU. I did a lot of juicy inpatient stuff. I also ran an outpatient practice at the hospital that I was working at the time. I was a clinical nutrition manager. And sort of the common thread through all of those work experiences, I've had a lot of jobs. And if you followed me on social media, you've heard about like all of them. I mean, like there's been a lot. That I think the common denominator was, if I think back at it, I was always interested in creating education materials, creating like little spreadsheets for the tube feeding algorithms, TPN algorithms for the NICU babies, for the burn unit, because that's a whole other story about how you do enteral feeding for that, and their needs constantly changing, and then when I was when I ran the outpatient practice, I had this little weight loss group that I coordinated. And I went in and I worked with the IT department to figure out how we could get better reimbursed so that I could keep that business going because I loved doing it. And then also when I was a clinical nutrition manager, I set up this malnutrition screening algorithm, all the time working either on some sort of computer, working with the IT department in the bigger places that I was at. And then at some point I was looking for a job. I think I was a clinical nutrition manager. I was looking for a new job and we'd all just gotten the internet, and I was looking on Monster and Career Builder, and Hot Jobs was out then too.
Oh yeah.
And you remember that?
Oh
and
yeah.
they had no jobs for dietitians. I'm like, that's weird. Or like, 1 or 2. I'm like, that is not the scoop. That is not the scoop. And so I said, like, all right, I'm going to figure out how to make this happen for our profession. I'm going to create this website. I got a book on HTML and HTML for dummies, and just like hand coded this little homegrown website. And I would do like, you right click and view source on the back end of Monster and Careerable. I'm like, oh, that's how you build a table. Oh, that's how you highlight something.
I love that.
And people would email me their jobs, and I would FTP them. I would, upload them onto the website. And that's how it all started. And then I started charging employers and recruiters for posting their jobs and getting the word out to dietitians about there's these jobs. I've got this website, Nutrition Jobs, check it out, and it just grew from there. It grew into this really wonderful business. And so then fast forward, when I had my firstborn child, I realized I couldn't hold down the research business, the research job that I had, plus running the websites, plus having this newborn, which is crazy amount of, of what I put onto myself. And so that's when I started running Nutrition Jobs full time.
Nice.
That's the genesis. That was sort of like the back end of how I got into it, but always super interested in like the little
tech.
granular, the tech part of it. I still love it.
Sandy Pagan on a while back. She runs Dietitian Hub. And, I told her I have this secret passion to learn like coding because I use a web developer. And her response was, dietitians are most minded very well for computer science and computer coding. And I was like, do not encourage me. Like, I need to be told, no, like stay in your zone of genius. But I think it's interesting how many dietitians have kind of this very technical element. And then there's some that I think are really amazing at counseling and, that element. I just love our profession, that it's so broad. So
I agree.
I think it's I want to kind of wrap up this conversation about your background into this whole idea of becoming an entrepreneur, that it kind of, I don't know, just happened. What are your thoughts on this? Seeing yourself as an entrepreneur, the evolution with 20 years behind you, maybe for those of us who are, less seasoned in the entrepreneurial world.
So, so it's interesting. I was just actually doing a podcast on this very topic, about the topic of money, with Christine Diane. And we were talking about, so when I didn't explain, like when I first started the website, the first couple of years, I didn't charge anybody for anything. And then there was a few things that happened, and I realized I could charge. It just didn't dawn on me, quite honestly. Like I went into a profession about dietetics and helping people with their nutrition, and I would go work for a place that had a salary for me. But meanwhile, I grew up in a household with 2 parents that had their own businesses. They did everything on their own. My mom's an interior designer and my dad's a contractor. And so that was my background, that I never was exposed to people having a salary. Fast forward again to when the business of Nutrition Jobs started really taking off. I remember going into a meeting with a bunch of dietitians, and if anyone's heard the story, you'll appreciate it again, that I walked into this meeting with a bunch of dietitians, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I just made so much money today, like thousands of dollars today. I am embarrassed. I feel like I can't tell anybody. I can talk about it with my friends, but I can't talk to my dietitian friends about it, because I know that they're probably making $20 or $30 an hour, and I just made a boatload of money. And then I think in the last 5 to 10 years, there have been a lot more dietitians promoting the idea that dietitians can make money, and it's okay. And you don't have to be this nurturing person making minimum wage. You can be a nurturing person making a boatload of money, and meeting all the needs and promoting our profession as women, as there's 90% of us in the dietetic profession are women. It's okay, and it's good.
I love hearing you say that?
Right. So it was this mindset. And I wasn't the one who pioneered that. I pioneered a job board, but pretend I did not pioneer the idea that we can and should be making a boatload of money, and it's okay. There's nothing to hide about it. But that took a lot of other dietitians showing me that. And it was that idea that when it's just like wearing masks right now in the middle of COVID. I remember back in February walking around like Chinatown and seeing some of my fellow San Franciscans in Chinatown all wearing masks. And I was like, that's ridiculous. That's so crazy. And now we all do, but it's this thing that you need some momentum behind it to normalize something. And I think to normalize the idea that you don't have to make a lot of money, but it's okay to make a lot of money, or it's okay to be creating a business, whether it's your full-time business or a side gig, whatever it is, it's okay to be doing that. And there's a lot of different ways that can be done.
Love that. Talk about money, that I think sometimes it takes time as you get going to kind of go through the money mindset work. So those are powerful words. So let's switch and start, diving into the topic of jobs. So are there fewer jobs for registered dietitians right now? Are jobs more scarce, or are they different? Give us a little bit of the landscape from what you're seeing.
Yeah. So back in March of 2020, I noticed a dramatic drop in jobs that were posted on my site, jobs that were available on all the other sites, jobs that were available on company pages. They just sort of evaporated. People didn't know what was happening. They didn't know if they could come into work or not. Restrictions were changing county by state, by the country. And so there was like a lot of inactivity in March, a little bit in April, and then it started picking back up once we figured out what the projection was going to look like and what the needs were of each individual company. Then it started to flow back in. And so I think now, yes, there are a lot of jobs out there for dietitians. Are they the same as they were back in January? No, they are not. There's a lot of positions that you'll see on my site and on other sites. You'll see it starts off as a remote and transition into in person, or it might be a remote for 2 days out of the week and in person 3 days out of the week, or vice versa. So the environment in which someone's working is very different. But there are definitely a ton of jobs. I think there's a greater awareness now also with dietitians to not just be looking for the brick and mortar type jobs. If you're looking for a job versus trying to create your own job, that there are lots of like writing gigs you can do on the side. There are counseling gigs you can also do. There's just a lot of different opportunities, I think, that people are more aware of and more receptive to, and can position themselves to be attractive for those types of jobs. And so that's sort of where I've been pivoting my own business. You and I were talking before, and I think initially I saw my job as this portal for dietitians to find jobs, for employers to find dietitians because their resumes are posted on the website, and then sort of bring those all together, and also have a lot of supporting articles and show what other dietitians are doing. It's all kind of over there. I think what I was noticing over the last couple of years, I started to get more involved in how a dietitian presents themselves to the employer to make themselves more attractive. And then that just really ramped up this year as I was able to spend more time working with people virtually on how to improve their presentation for a job interview, for getting the interview with a resume and with their LinkedIn profile. So that's how it's all sort of shifted. So there's definitely jobs, and you've got to look so good for those jobs.
Yes, and I definitely want to talk about that. But you mentioned this idea of not currently job hunting. So, I am thinking of myself, if I had to job hunt right now, this whole idea of partially remote, going into work, how do you may not have applied for a job like that, before. What are you looking for when you're trying to compare different jobs? I think right now there's a lot of unknowns, right? Of what's that gonna look like? What questions should you be asking? What should you be really focusing on those job postings to really understand And are there any things you've seen about those kind of postings?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. That just we were just talking about that recently with a group that I was doing some group counseling with on how to present yourself, and that was a big issue that came up. Is so looking at these jobs, the compensation is probably going to look a little bit different because it's not just going to be salary at this point. You want some if let's say the position is you're working 2 days in person, maybe it's a private practice or a practice group with a physician group or worksite wellness or something where you're supposed to be in person a couple days a week and then you're supposed to be working remote the other 3. Let's just set up that scenario. So and let's say you're looking at the compensation and the salary, whatever it might be, and hopefully it's at least 20% greater than what your previous job was, somewhere in that ballpark, maybe a little bit more, of course. Look at what else is being offered for that position. So you're going to have to work at home. You want to be able to have some support, maybe with compensation for, I'm looking around, like maybe you want them to give you a webcam. I don't have a webcam right next to me, but maybe you want them to buy you a webcam so that you can launch that up above. And they can be like $100 or $200 depending on what brand you're getting. So, and then maybe you want a little tripod to put your, you want some equipment. And maybe you want a stipend for that. Maybe you want them to provide that. Maybe they'll even provide you a laptop that's specifically for work so that you have your personal laptop and then you have their laptop, which you will give back later on. But if you're uploading all your files to the cloud, you don't have to get too concerned about how it's being used. But those might be some negotiables. Maybe you get a phone included in your package, or maybe you get a food allowance, or you get a travel stipend that you would normally have been spending getting to work and now you're not. Maybe you get like in-house or a subscription to virtual exercise or something that can sweeten the package a little bit. You could be looking for those types of things. So that's that will change. So I wouldn't get too hung up in what the compensation is, but that's something that I'm seeing that's a little bit different now. But I think it's sort of a little bit tie into what you were saying. I think then when you're interviewing for that position, one of the key things is you want to demonstrate to them that you're able to do remote and in person. You want to talk about how you've done excellent customer service remote, because it's a really different environment working with a patient, a client, whatever it might be, remote. You have to be able to clue into. So like right now, while I'm talking, I'm trying to look at the green dot. I'm also trying to look at Megan. So I want to you want to be able to read the person that you're working with and be able to identify what kind of issues they might be having. Let's say you're doing nutrition counseling. Do they have adequate, cooking facilities or whatever it might be? Just sort of being able to tune in more to what it is that they're doing. It also has some advantages, but you want to make sure that that is included in the way you're presenting yourself to apply for that job, that you're adept at doing all those things.
Do you think these jobs that are, I'm just curious, your thoughts, that have some remote element and an in-person element are, presented as a very temporary thing because of the current situation or the potential to, be that way for a long time? Because I think if you're sitting in a job that's maybe you've been at for a while, but maybe you're not satisfied with the pay or the responsibilities or the opportunity, and you're looking at some of these other jobs and saying, well, maybe I could make more, but they feel like they're a little bit more uncertain because there's like this remote element. I'm just curious your thoughts on that, if people are looking, because there are opportunities.
Yeah, there are. And I think, what's interesting too, though, is that I think a lot of employers have this idea of what they wanted to this year to look like. They thought, oh, okay, in September, we're all going to be going back into the office. Okay, that didn't happen. All right, let's look then at April. April 2021 is going to look so much different now. You're all going to be back in the office. And it turns out that may not be it either. So I wouldn't hold the employer too accountable for what they think it's going to look like, because there's a lot of factors out of our control. But also I feel like, and I've heard this from other dietitians who are in private practice, for that niche specifically, that they have found that their clients, their customers, their patients actually prefer remote learning. They prefer the ease. They have fewer cancellations. They have fewer late people. They have, there's a greater volume of people coming in, that people are becoming more comfortable. Like my 83-year-old mom is like really good at Zoom now. And they, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, well, they didn't exist then, but even like a year ago, they would have said, that's just not for me. Right. Yeah. But so I think it's shifting the way that we're working. So I think being adaptable, right? Being open and adaptable, and not so hard on the employer about, making sure that they're doing what they said they were going to do, because there's a lot of variables that go into keeping a business afloat, into keeping up with regulations for the county or the city or the state, right? So I think there's a lot to look for. So I think being adaptable to what different environments can look like is probably going to serve us all well, myself included,
Yeah. So how do you stand out from a resume perspective? Maybe you haven't been job hunting, recently, and are employers really looking for the same things they were looking for a year ago? If you had a resume that maybe you didn't, let's talk about two things. Maybe you haven't looked at your resume in 10 years, or you haven't looked at your resume in a year. Like what's changed recently, and then we can talk about some best practices in general. I hope you know what I'm asking.
Yeah. I think I do understand what you're asking. So I think going back to that point, so let's say I'll just address the first question is, how should your resume look now, even if you just did a nice revamp about a year ago or 7 months ago? Right now, you need to put on there that you're good at whatever kind of platforms. You're good at Zoom. And if you're not, you're going to get good at it. We'll find different ways to do that. You're going to get good at doing remote work. You're going to be demonstrating that on your skills section. You're going to include that in your research. You could also on your work experience, and then what you've put in there. And that you've researched different ways of providing whatever service that you're doing. Let's say you're a writer, that you're very good at uploading and providing that written communication, that you are adept with different scheduling systems, Acuity or Calendly, like whatever it is that you're used to.
Or Trello and Asana or Slack, or what channels they use.
Yeah, and if you don't know how to use those, and you want to put those skills on your resume, which I highly recommend, there's plenty of YouTube videos about it, or get an intern in and have them teach you how to use Trello or whatever it is, and exchange something for them for that, so that you can get adept at it. That you're better at social media for business, that you can provide that service, or that you're familiar with it. So I think it's just any sort of online, remote, virtual platform. Make sure that you know some of those, if not as many as you can, but looking on YouTube and getting some help with that.
Right, because looking at it from the hiring manager's perspective, right, they want to get someone who is going to be as self-sufficient and up to speed as quickly as possible, because, I was a clinical nutrition manager as well. Those training, I don't have the training hours and the money, it's all in your budget, right? It might be a line item, but you make your budget based on your total departmental, but whatever, you run a company, money.
Yeah.
Right? So the time you're spending bringing someone up to speed, if they already are proficient at a lot of the tools that you're using, if you're comparing to dietitians, how much do you think employers are weighing some of the prowess at the electronic, virtual, knowing that it might be temporary? How much a premium is it, people who are really proficient? I'm curious to know.
I think it depends on the company. So it depends on how much in person the company management is. Sometimes the management might be, so if they're only at 25% capacity in an office, it might be the managers and maybe some of the support staff that are going in, and it's the middle people that are not going in. And so the manager, let's say your manager is more in the middle line, and they're also working from home, and their state does not have kids that are able to go back in person. So being mindful of what your own boss, your new boss is up against. Your new boss may have restrictions on their time. So as much as you can pitch in and be, again, adaptable and adept at a lot of different services, I think that really, really benefits you for sure. So you just, every work situation is totally different. But I think, so kind of leading then into the next question is about how to present yourself. I think this has been sort of my epiphany over the last several years. So, in fact, so when we were at Fancy a few years ago, I started doing this thing called the resume reviews, and people would send me their resumes ahead of Fancy, and then I would take a look at them and give them a few pointers. So that's what I said I was going to do, and then I had like a little checklist and a little matrix for them to Rubik's, and then give it back to them. They picked them up at the booth. I remember like one of the first few resumes I got, it was like, this is a really fancy dietitian that everybody would know their name. And this resume is like, what the heck? This resume is not that person, which meant that, I mean, how many times do you do a resume, right? Like how many times do you even look at your resume? Like a handful of times. Like you might use them for presentations or getting an award, but it's like a handful of times that you're going to present them to an employer, right? Not that many times. You don't give it much priority. You don't give it much time. And so I think it was like this epiphany of like, oh my gosh, my fellow dietitians need some serious help with these resumes. I know that, and this happens all the time. I just got another one yesterday. Like I look at it, I'm like, I don't think this is not who this person is. And then you start talking with them and you realize they were very humble about putting something they did in there, or they'd forgotten about it. They thought that they needed to, shrink the resume down so tiny and tight that it didn't like sell who they were. It wasn't selling all of their awesomeness. And so I think that goes back to whatever your work situation is, whether you've been working or revamped a resume in the last year or 10 years ago, really take the time and the intention of figuring out what you are doing that has value, what you have done that has value, showing and selling who you are and your value with these quantifiable statements, these bullet points.
Give us an example of like done poorly and maybe done much better.
So the classic one is, let's say you're a clinical dietitian, perform nutrition counseling according to the nutrition care practice for diabetes and burn units, period. Like, it doesn't tell me anything about what you did. But what if the same person, so you can have like a little blurb in there under that clinical dietetic job. You can say what your scope of what you did. Yes, you can say that. But then right under that bullet point, and you want like 3 or 4 bullet points of quantifiable work experience, implemented patient satisfaction survey, or practice to affect 85% improvement in patient satisfaction over a 6-month period of time, using this tool, that tool, and that tool. Implemented malnutrition tool according to X standard, and improved albumin by X% over X period of time. So putting in numbers, dollars, implemented diabetic intervention group, whereby they decrease their hemoglobin A1C by 10% or 20% or 50%, whatever that was over X amount of time. Tell this person who's looking at you whether or not they should employ you, what value you have. A business is a business. They want to know how you're going to improve their client or patient satisfaction, their likability as a company, and how you're going to either save them money or make them money. So whatever you can put in there in terms of marketing efforts or quantifiable outcomes, benchmarking everything that you're doing and quantifying what it is that you can do. One, if you had a job like 10 years ago, you can barely remember what you did there. If there was like one thing in there that has like one bullet point of one quantifiable work outcome that you can show, is like gold. And then the other thing I think is, it's not always, when I get a resume or I look at someone's LinkedIn profile, I look at it, I'm like, I don't know what this person, what their background is. I don't get it. I don't get their background. I don't understand where they want to go and how they're going to do that and how they're of service. And so I love the idea of having in your LinkedIn profile or on your resume a little statement of what your background is, what you're good at, how you're good at, how you can be of service, and where you want to go, what you want to do. You can include that or not include that, but I think the idea of that exercise of doing that, and I call it your professional summary or your summary of qualifications. It's also your about section on your LinkedIn profile, or your headline, which is just the 120 character bit in the top. That tells you also as a job seeker, like that kind of is like your elevator pitch, or that from that, every answer goes out from that. Every approach you take to showing how you can be of service and how you can work for somebody, and how you can have someone work with you, is all tidied up into that little chunk in there. And like I say, whether you include that on your resume or not, that should sort of speak through everything that you do, with the keywords that you include in your LinkedIn profile, and the keywords that are in your resume. Not too many of our resumes go through an applicant tracking system, but let's say you're applying for a position with a bigger company, like Compass Group, or some of the bigger groups where they do pass all the resumes through an applicant tracking system. They're looking for some keywords. I think they would look at every single person's resume, but you want also the person reading the resume to see that keyword, even if it's not going into some algorithm, but to actually see that keyword that you put in there, that you're adept at remote nutrition counseling, or that you are good at TPN, or whatever it is that you are trying to sell. Make sure that is showing up in your resume or your LinkedIn profile.
I think you really did a great job of kind of the importance of really showing value of what you've done over your career. My background as a clinical manager, I hired hundreds of people and looked at thousands of resumes, and really you're making that determination quickly, right? So you're looking at that first summary of who are you, what are you about, what are the big strengths you have, and then you're looking at those pages to see, does what you've done really validate that and further excite you as you review the rest of the resume, going, I was really excited about what you told me on the first page, and now I totally believe it because I read all of the value statements you gave. And that person, right, gets the call for the interview, right?
Yeah. And most people are probably qualified for the job. Let's say you got a pool of 20 resumes, probably most of them, maybe one or two weren't, but it was how those top 2 or 3 were presented. Was it a resume that was easy to read? Was it concise and telling a nice story? Was it cohesive? Was it presented well that you could read it easily? Just the formatting of the aesthetics, like that shouldn't matter, but it really helps you clearly see a story.
Should you hire out your resume?
I actually, so this is really funny. So I offer resume review services, and people will say to me, oh, well, why don't you just rewrite it for me? And I'm like, well, I can't, don't spend any money with anybody who's going to, charge you $400 to rewrite your resume, because guess what? They're not going to make up stuff about you. You have to tell them everything. You have to say what all your bullet points were. They have no idea. So that's why I don't ever say I'm going to write it for you. I will help you. I'll help, we work on it together on a Google Doc, on a shared doc. And so we kind of work on it together, but I'm going to be asking all those same things. And I think it's just the exercise of going through it. What you don't know to put on there, what you didn't know you're supposed to put on there, right? Like I have this eye for you need some clarity in your resume. And then going through the whole process of talking about someone's resume becomes very clarifying for people what it is they want to do. Like the first call, they're like, I don't know what I want to do. And then within, a few minutes of just like going through their background, it becomes really clear to somebody what they want to do, what kind of work they want to do, or what they don't want to do. And you can have, I always say not to have too many different types of resumes out there. I think you can have resumes specific for a couple jobs. But if keeping I recommend actually keeping three documents. Your CV, which is every little job you've ever had. Like my little lab job when I was at UC Davis, when I was a junior in college. Like that's on my CV. Every publication, every webinar I've ever given, every talk I've ever done, like every single job is in this CV. And then from that, I have a resume that then has the things that are sort of more applicable to what I'm doing or the talk that I'm giving or whatever it might be. And then you have your LinkedIn profile, which is telling a whole other dynamic story about yourself. So
you must talk about LinkedIn.
I know. I love LinkedIn. So it's funny. I've been on LinkedIn for years. I think I just gave a presentation and I said what year I started. I think it was 2004. And so I've been on there for a really long time. And I don't think I really understood the value of it until like, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. It is a gold mine of leads if you have your own business, or if you're looking for opportunities. Like I've got a ton of opinions about how dietitians can present themselves. I just did this really fun thing for the Iowa Dietetic Association for their annual conference, for the state annual conference. And I just did like rapid fire reviews for people's LinkedIn profiles. It was so fun. And again, it was one of these things like you look at this profile and you're like, I know this person's a whole lot more than this, this isn't representing who they are. And so I give a couple recommendations and then poof, it's like, oh my gosh, there you are. Yeah, it's really fun.
So if we want it, let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn. So you have optimizing your profile. What are kind of the top, I guess, mistakes people are making with LinkedIn? And then maybe we can talk about kind of what to do instead.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to use your profile, right, to connect with potential, employers, and then maybe we can even talk about that whole messaging of sending message and reaching out on LinkedIn. Should you do it? What's the right way to do it?
Yeah. So I think the first thing you need to do is make sure you have what's called the all-star profile. And that's just a nomenclature thing that LinkedIn uses. There's a certain criteria of different steps you need to complete. I think there's 9 different things. You've got to have 50 connections, 50 connections. You have to have your education section in there. You've got to have 3 work experiences, including your current one. You've got to have a profile picture. You have to have industry, your headline, and your about section. I think I'm missing something in there. You can have skills. Those are not required. Recommendations, those are not required. Any media or featured items, those are not required. So the bottom line is you need to have those criteria. And then you'll see it on your dashboard. When you log into your LinkedIn profile, you'll see on your dashboard, it'll have like this little goofy star. It'll says you have all-star status. And that pushes you into a different threshold for the algorithm that your profile gets seen by people and recommended by people. So if you think of, I think of LinkedIn like a gigantic spreadsheet, like I'm entering all these things into this gigantic spreadsheet that is part of a SEO algorithm. So once I reach a particular threshold, then they sort of open me up more. If I had this all-star profile, they will open me up more into more searches. And so it just starts to accumulate where you get noticed more. People are, your comments from your feed that you're posting, if you're posting anything, even if it's just like once a week, something work related, that it gets shown to your community of your connections, or people might learn about that you're available to work. I don't recommend putting that little green thing available to open to work. I think that looks really desperate and cheesy. That's just me. There's other ways to find work. You can signal to recruiters. You could just go into your profile and signal to recruiters that you're open to work. So when people have different types of LinkedIn profile accounts, you can have the free version, which I've had for many years. And then now I have the Sales Navigator version. Recruiters will have the recruiter version, and they can then they get like a lead of all the people that are available to work, and they will have searches in there for keywords. So you want to make sure your LinkedIn profile is optimized for keywords. So one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, let's say you got your profile picture and you want to have your eyes like looking straight on, you want to look like someone fun to work with, right? You don't want it to be a wedding shot or seeing like someone else's hand, you like cropped out their husband or their wife or whatever. It's like, don't do those. They're work ones. Just get a phone and just take a nice, have someone do like a nice portrait one of you. You just want to look nice to work with, and you want to be kind of close. Like I'll come in, like you want to be a little bit closer than, kind of far back. And so once you've got that, then you want to have your name, and then you want to have your credentials after your name. And then in your LinkedIn, in your headline, so you get like 120 to 200 characters, depending on whether you're doing desktop or mobile. You can put in there so I change mine all the time, by the way. And that's kind of the fun thing about LinkedIn. It's so dynamic. It's just like a website. You can constantly change it. It's a little harder to change your resume all the time. But your LinkedIn profile, I change mine all the time. And so the headline, you want it to have some keywords. How do you want people to find you? I want people to find me because I do some career coaching. So I put that in there. I put dietitian in there. I put what I think, cheerleader or champion or something. I want that kind of stuff in there. And there are a few other things I have in there. So just, you want to, if that's what you're doing, if you're a media spokesperson or somebody, you want to say, you're a virtual speaker. I think I put that in mine in there too. Virtual speaker. So it was interesting, is I had what I thought was a pretty good profile, I don't know, a few years ago. And you can see how many people have looked at your profile, how many people have engaged with your profile. And I then worked a little bit with this woman, Janine Hogan, who she has a podcast called All Star LinkedIn Profiles. And I made some changes with her. I changed my about section. I made it first person narrative. I talked about a little bit more how I could be of service. Not so much about like, I went to UC Davis, not so much about my academic background.
What value you're bringing, right?
Yeah. But I did put the value in there, but I think I was doing it more from my sort of research background and my academic background, as we do as dietitians, like, my PowerPoint mentality. And I changed it a little bit to say more how I can be of service, how someone can work with me, and different things about me. Like overnight, Megan, it was really funny. I was in the middle of a talk actually, and it was a live look at my LinkedIn profile. And I remember I had like 200 or 100 or so previews of my profile every week. And then I remember like looking at the stage and looking up at the thing, and it was a live version, and it showed my dashboard, and it showed how many previews. It was like 600 previews in one day. And this all happened right after I made some of these changes. So I was like, oh my gosh, what just happened? That works. It really changes the way the algorithm works. When you put in these keywords, it shows up. And like I said, imagine your whole profile is one big spreadsheet, and the back end of it, if you take off the pretty skin, like it's just a bunch of it's just a spreadsheet of data, and people are searching for your data. And if they find your keyword, you're a virtual speaker or whatever, they'll find you. And so they will find you. So that was a long-winded answer.
Do you find that the people who are searching, like recruiters or people who are getting reached out to for jobs on LinkedIn, are similar or different from the kind of jobs maybe get posted on nutritionjobs.com? So kind of the different like places we could be looking for jobs, especially kind of right now, I guess.
Yeah.
Before we
There's a ton of places to look. So obviously my site, Nutrition Jobs, but then on LinkedIn, there's a lot of good jobs there. And if you've got Sales Navigator, or you've got a friend who's got Sales Navigator, I'm your friend. I can tell you how many people have applied for that job and what their degrees are, what their skills are. Like, you can sort of see what your competition looks like, who also have applied for that job. There's also Facebook groups that you can belong to, run by other dietitians. They'll do some little, shout out of a job they heard about. Monster doesn't really have too many, those sort of the standard ones. I think I get some unique ones and some traditional ones. So I think those are kind of the good places to go. But I think that speaks to the idea that you want to let your network know that you're open, whether it's messaging or whether it's just letting someone know in a Facebook group. I've got a Facebook group too, but I think on, sort of like letting people know I'm looking for more speaking engagements, or I am in worksite wellness or corporate wellness, and I'm trying to put together some more packages for the lunch and learns, and which are so easy to do now because it's all done virtually. And just get the word out. This is how they can find me. Make sure they can go back to your own LinkedIn profile page. or other way to find you. I like having people go back to your LinkedIn profile page. It's just an easy click. It's easy way to find you. Make sure your contact information is current in there. And then in your let's say you have a regular job plus you do this like this side hustle gig. That can be a company, and then you can create a company page. Just look on your profile under the work tab, and then you can create a company page. Everyone who has a side gig or any type of side work should always have a company page where you can
finally created a company page. I got on LinkedIn like 3 years ago, and I felt totally overwhelmed by all of it. And
There's so much. I'm still learning. Yeah,
and then my nutrition communication person, like, I need a company page. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just overwhelmed with the personal thing. So finally it took me like 2.5 years, and I finally opened a company page. So
it's great. You can get leads. This is how people can understand you better. You can have testimonials in there. Like it's great. So those are all the, different ways that people can find jobs, like just getting the word out. I think there, just making sure people do know that you're looking for more work, or just letting people know you can be of service, whether it's articles on the topic. I've always so you can, under your profile, you can post articles. And so let's say you want to be a food writer, or you want to talk about lactation consulting. You can have an article in there, and at the bottom, just like any other, it's got SEO optimized as well. That just like on Google, people can find you that way as well. And just make sure there's always a call to action at the bottom of all of your, whether it's your about section on your main profile, or the articles, the featured articles that you have that carousel around on your profile, that make sure that there's always a call to action at the bottom to say like how they can find you or how they can work with you, whether it's a website or an email address or an opt-in page for your newsletter, or getting your freebie, your lead magnet freebie, to get them some information and to get their email address so you can stay in contact with them. Those are all good ways to.
So you mentioned, resources that you might have. How can people connect with you? What kind of goodies do you have for people who say, do you have a checklist for updating my resume or things to think about? What do you have, Stacey?
I have so much stuff. It's crazy. I love, because I love creating all this stuff. I've got 1,000 lead magnets, but I have 1,000 different things. So on my website, on Nutrition Jobs, there on the top navigation bar, there's a section called blog, and that has a bunch of articles. And then there's, I have like the current one is virtual job interviewing, or virtual connections, how to really optimize yourself for that. So there's checklists in there. And then also I have another section on the top called Learn, and that's where I have all my courses, and you can work with me one-on-one. I am having an upcoming workshop where we're going to talk about, it's called the Instant Makeover, where we're going to address both your LinkedIn profile and your resume. We'll do it together in a group. I'll go through all the nuts and bolts slower than what we've done here. And it's a 2-part series, and I will go through everyone's information. You can participate or not participate. We'll go through how to write a headline. We'll do like worksheet style. We'll go through all this stuff, and then people can get like a mini LinkedIn review as well. I will take a look at that. We could do a before and after. And there's going to be lots of stuff in there as well. And so if people want to do that, it's a 2-part series. It will start on Wednesday, December the 9th, and then we'll do a follow-up one on December the 16th. So the idea is to get your resume all done and all tidy and all cleaned up and just behind you, and your LinkedIn profile as well. Get that going before the new year, before everyone starts talking about and being stressed about, restrictions may be lifting and now everyone's looking for a job. You want to be already set, ready to go, and looking awesome and confident, and showing and selling what it is that you are really good at and what you're a value at. And people can register for that. I'm enrolling right now, and they can use the promotion code INSTANT, all uppercase INSTANT. And I think it's a 25% discount, and I think it goes for the first 10 or 15 people that can join. So,
and they'll find that on your website too.
But there should be room for people to engage with that.
Cool. So that is your instant makeover for a workshop that's coming up.
Okay, say that last bit again. My audio just cut out.
Oh no, that's your instant makeover workshop that's coming up in December. And then
yes, yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Stacey, awesome interview today. I as I knew, you were going to be an absolute wealth of information around, you know, resumes, LinkedIn, job hunting. So I encourage people to go to your blog, go to your web, go to your, you know, even your own LinkedIn profile and check out what you've done, and really starting to look with a critical eye, you know, to go back, re-listen to this, and, you know, maybe you won't get it perfect overnight, but to start setting a small list of a few things that you could do to get a little bit closer, and then just keep working at it. So really, really awesome. Thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, this was like so fantastic. Thank you so much, Megan. It was great to chat with you guys today.
Yes. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of November. I can't believe it's already November. And we'll be back again in December for the next edition of the RD2RD Live Show, talking a little bit more about becoming a media dietitian. We'll be talking with Amy Gorin, who you probably know, very connected dietitian in media, speaking, and writing. So that'll be a lot of fun. All right. Thanks again, Stacey.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.